All right. Hello, everyone who is coming into the webcast right now. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll give a second for everyone to trickle in here. But I'm Rachel with Strong Towns, and we're so glad to have you joining us for this Strongest Town Championship webcast. This is, I believe, our 7th year doing this contest. Every year, it's just so exciting to see all the different communities that participate, and really glad to have our 2 finalist representatives here. So let's get started. As I said, I'm Rachel. I'm the program director here at Strong Towns. You're here for the Strongest Town 2023 Championship. And I'm also joined by my colleague, Mike, who is our video creator. He's going to be helping out, and he'll also be making a film about the winning town that will premiere at our upcoming national gathering in May. I want to begin today by thanking and congratulating every town that's been part of this contest from the start. The enthusiasm that we've seen from communities, large and small, from the South, East Coast, Canada even, has been wonderful. And we're so glad that communities across the continent are thinking about becoming more financially resilient places. It's been exciting to hear your stories and see your photos and watch tens of thousands of votes come in throughout the last few weeks of this contest. So now we sit here with our 2 finalist towns, Saranac Lake, New York, and Brattleboro, Vermont. Huge congratulations to both of these towns for making it to this phase of our contest. We're going to start with some introductions so you can meet the representatives from these towns. And then we'll just have a conversation and learn more about them. And then we'll make some time for audience Q&A at the end too. So for those who are watching, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A as we're going along, and we'll get to those. So let's start by hearing from Sue Fillion of Brattleboro, Vermont. Thank you for being here. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to Brattleboro? How long have you lived there, and what do you do in Brattleboro?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Sue Fillion. I am the planning director for the town of Brattleboro. I have been working in town since 2003. I have been working with the town of Brattleboro since 2009. And I have a long history with Brattleboro. I'm not from Brattleboro, but at age 3, my family used to come up here or came up to the area to go camping every October. And so it's a tradition that still happens. And so I just, go up the road to camp with them. So I love Brattleboro. I love working here. And I'm happy to have been part of this application. I had some other colleagues to help work on this application. There was Sarah Lang, who kind of spearheaded the entire application. She's a planning commissioner for the town. And then our planning commission chair, Tom Mozakowski, was also involved, and my colleague, Steve Hayes. So
awesome.
We're excited to be where we're at.
Thanks. And now let's go to Charlie Lamino III of Saranac Lake. Can you tell us a little about yourself and your connection to your community? How long have you lived there? What do you do in Saranac Lake?
Yeah, so I'm Charlie. I'm an engineer here, a structural engineer. I moved here actually quite recently. So I moved here only 6 months ago, but I've been looking to move here for a lot longer. It's kind of been a goal, but I finally made it up here recently. I went to school in the area. I graduated in 2018, and I always wanted to come back. So I finally got the opportunity to do so about 6 months ago, and really wanted to get involved with the community pretty fast. So I got involved with the Parks and Trails Advisory Board. So I'm now a board member on the Parks and Trails Advisory Board, helping kind of make decisions to maintain the parks and utilize the master plan for the pedestrian master plan and cycling master plan down, and the complete streets policies. So I'm getting really involved with that stuff, working with the community development director of Saranac Lake, Jamie Kinkoski, who also helped with the application, and the Franklin County executive economic. I always screw it up. It's like a long string of words, but he's the CEO, and he also helped with this application.
Awesome. Well, welcome to you both. Let's now hear just a little bit about each of your communities for those who are maybe tuning in later to the contest. What should we know about Brattleboro? Like, paint us a really brief picture. What is this community like, Sue?
Sure. So we are a town of 12,184 people. We're located in southeastern Vermont, so right in the corner, touching, we're on the Connecticut River, right next to New Hampshire and Massachusetts. We have a really well-preserved historic downtown with vibrant shops and restaurants and residential and commercial, office space on the second floor. We have a really great downtown organization that helps keep our downtown thriving. That's the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, really active chamber of commerce. We have walkable neighborhoods that surround the downtown, within a mile and a half with sidewalks. We have really rich arts and cultural community with all different mediums of art, whether it's jazz music, theater. We have a youth theater. We have, River Gallery Art School, performance arts, and we even have a pretty famous circus school, the New England Center for Circus Arts. We have a lot of outdoor recreation opportunities. There's a lot of kayaking and canoeing and public access trails. We're kind of a gateway to some of the ski areas in Vermont. So, we have access to the Amtrak bus. The highway comes right through. We have 3 interstate exits. We have a, ski jump. We have a, outside kind of ethic to the community. We have a famous ski jump with an annual competition that's been going on for over 100 years. And we just have a really strong connection to our place. So in addition to this downtown, we have about 2/3 of our land is more rural. So we have actual working farms. We have some forestry going on and gravel pits. So it's a good mix for the community. And while I kind of paint this postcard picture, we also deal with a lot of challenges that other communities across the country are facing. So we've got the aging infrastructure. We've been fortunate. Our population growth has just been stagnant for 60 years. So we're not shrinking, but we're not growing appreciably. We have a large population, probably like Saranac Lake does, of people over the age of 64. And we have people who are unhoused, and we have food insecurity. But I think what I would want to say about Brattleboro is we have a really strong culture of resilience. We build partnerships to tackle the difficult problems. We're able to leverage a lot of resources that different people can bring to the table. And we have a lot of pride in our community. And the people are really special.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think the connection to the outdoors is something that these two towns definitely have in common. So Charlie, can you tell us a little bit about Saranac Lake? Paint that picture for people who haven't been there.
Sure. We have, it seems that in a lot of ways that Brattleboro and Saranac Lake are like almost different sides of a same coin in a lot of ways. We're also a town in the Northeast, in the woods, in the mountains, have a very strong connection with nature, and a historic downtown with its own organization that helps to keep the downtown thriving. So the town board identified like 5 main kind of areas where we wanted to focus some extra energy. So there's 5 all volunteer led like kind of task forces, advisory boards. So there's a downtown advisory board, a Parks and Trails advisory board, a housing task force, a climate smart communities task force, and an arts and culture advisory board. So focuses a lot on those things. Saranac Lake was started in the 1800s. It really kind of blew up as a wellness center where people who were sick can come and get fresh mountain air and just be happy and, I don't know, live out their days breathing fresh air. And then it was also a logging town for a bit, and more recently it is probably its biggest economic driver is tourism. Winter and summer sports are big here. There's also some other, we tried to recently expand where our jobs are. So we also have like some biotech companies in the area, just trying to make sure that tourism isn't our only economic driver. So unlike Brattleboro, we're not a township. So we're a village, we're much smaller. We don't have too much rural areas. It's a quite dense town. We have 5,000 people. I don't exactly know the area of town, but it's pretty dense. We don't have any, there's no zoning areas where we restrict housing to only single family homes. So housing is very loose. People can choose to do what they want with their lots. That has resulted in a pretty dense village where there's kind of multifamily houses everywhere. I live in a 5-family home myself. And people also, there's a lot of houses that have become businesses. So on my walk to work, there is a bakery that was a house on a street very close to downtown. We also have a large arts and culture presence. There is a few organizations that are really facilitating the continued growth of our arts and culture area. We have Artworks, which is kind of a group of organizations of all different kinds of arts. So there's the Adirondack Center for Writing, which is promoting the literary arts. There is a bunch of, I think there's over a dozen galleries downtown for different arts. We have a dance sanctuary. There's Art Rise, which is an organization that does art classes and focuses a lot on after-school activities for kids and high schoolers. There's Trestle Street, which there's a lot of music in this town. Trestle Street is like a recording studio and venue and for dances and music lessons. And there's a bunch of venues in town. There's the Water Hall has been here for over 20 years. And it has music, especially in the summer, like almost every week. I feel like has bands coming in from outside. Adirondack Center for Writing also does like poetry, where they're posting poetry around town in like darker times. So like in this right now in the Northeast, this is mud season where like hiking is kind of miserable because all the snow is melting. So they're putting poetry all around town. And then there's also an artist guild that is an organization of a bunch of like the kind of gallery owners and like the independent artists that get together and promote their art, and along with others. I mean, there's a long list of art organizations in town with different festivals. There's the Plein Air Festival, the Kick-Ass Writers Festival in town. So we have a pretty large artist community as well.
Cool. Okay. Yes. A lot going on, especially for such a small community too. Yeah, I'm glad you touched on housing because I wanted to ask about that. I know both of your communities in different phases of this contest mentioned that there's this challenge of wanting to expand housing options, deal with housing affordability issues, but also not overextend your infrastructure and, build some more like suburban style development on the edge of town that you can't afford to maintain. I would love to hear from each of you about the ways that your towns are trying to find more creative ways to create housing options that still, keep financially prudent and grow in an incremental way. Sue, maybe we could start with you. What are some of the ways that Brattleboro is working on housing challenges?
Sure. So we have been doing a lot of housing work. I would say it started in 2021. We undertook a housing action plan, and we learned that we had, we were in immediate need of over 500 housing units. So that really helped spur us to action. We've always allowed accessory dwelling units. They have always been more permissive than state statute and lots of other communities. But because our housing stock is about 50% single family and 50% multi-unit, we had accessory dwelling units, but they really weren't increasing. So we needed to find other ways to kind of spur some incremental housing. We had several property owners, some landlords who approached us during the early days of the pandemic, knowing that we had a housing need, and they wanted to add some more units. And so we're like, well, not really sure what we can do about it. Well, we settled on removing our density regulations in our various zoning districts, because we figured that we had setbacks and we had some building form guidelines and we had some lot coverage requirements that, this kind of hypothetical 1 unit per 6,000 square feet, we knew that it was a barrier to getting more housing, and we knew that we were going to get the form that we wanted by our other guidelines and regulations. So So yeah, so we removed that, the select board voted that in, and immediately we saw over 20 units of housing created kind of over the next several months. So that was effective, and that was coupled with some relief that the state of Vermont was offering through some funding from the CARES Act. So, again, leveraging what the state was doing with something that we could do made an improvement. Currently, our planning commission is working on really increasing missing middle housing. So, the 3 to maybe 9 units of housing in our developed neighborhoods where there's existing water and sewer. And so we are finalizing a set of zoning amendments that we'll take to the public and to the select board. And hopefully, we've done a lot of outreach, did a lot of neighborhood walks so that people could understand that our neighborhoods are dense and that this housing does exist, and they might not know how many units are actually in a structure. So we were able to do some education on that. So we're really hopeful that that is going to spur some housing and make it easier for incremental development in the community. The town is also we're doing a lot of work with community groups and small scale developers. We don't really, we're not a city, so we don't have big developers that are coming in and doing housing projects. So as people express interest, we'll work with them to see what their possibilities are. And even if it's just somebody coming in who's going to build a single unit, we'll talk to them about, oh, there's a great housing need in the community, or here's some pathways that you could put extra units, whether it's an accessory dwelling unit or whether it's townhomes, something like that. And then the town of Brattleboro also has some funding support that we're able to consider giving when it's an affordable housing project. So we have revolving loan funds that come from our community development block grants that have been used. There are also some programs in the community that can help people design an accessory dwelling unit, and maybe a little funding towards the construction. So we're always sharing those resources. And we have one big project in town right now, the Winston Prouty Center. It's a former campus for the deaf and hard of hearing that is no longer located there, and it's kind of Winston Prouty Center bought it, and there's several buildings, and they're looking to do infill housing on that. And so we've been involved with that project. We are right now sponsoring a community development block grant for them to look at their water and sewer infrastructure, because we know it will need to be upgraded. And then we're doing a lot of housing to make sure that it's resilient, or a lot of housing work to make sure that it's resilient. We had a tropical storm in 2011 that damaged a lot of housing in a mobile home park, as well as senior affordable housing, because where do you put that kind of housing in the floodplain? Because it's cheap, but it's not safe. And we do have flooding issues in town. So Brattleboro has been doing a lot of work with both the Brattleboro Housing Partnerships and the Tri-Park Mobile Home Cooperative to make sure that we can relocate that housing out of those dangerous and risky areas. And so again, partnerships with the state of Vermont, with the town, with the different organizations and other organizations throughout the state, to make sure that we're not losing housing and making sure it's safe for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, can we also hear from you on some of the ways that Saranac Lake is trying to address housing challenges in a creative way?
Yeah, sure. So the most recent thing that we've tried to work through is we have a lot of short-term housing or short-term rentals, sorry, like Airbnbs, kind of verbos in our town, and they've been growing a lot, and a lot of residents have been worried about that, with just kind of people would move out, or landlords would decide that they can make more money with short-term rentals, or exterior investors would come in and buy a property and start just renting it out, and they don't live here, they're not invested in our community. So the past almost probably a year, we've been working on a short-term rental regulation that is just going through its kind of final stages with the development board right now. And what that's doing is kind of just like capping the amount of short-term rentals in different neighborhoods, granting some variances, some exceptions for specific scenarios, which the town board kind of can decide whatever it wants for those variances, which kind of allow the weird corner, like unexpected circumstances to be allowed if we decide that they will be a benefit to our community. Some of those examples could be if a family wants to move back to town, which happens a lot. A lot of families end up growing up here. They are like, oh man, I can't stand rural towns. They go move away and they decide actually Saranac Lake was really great and they want to come back. In order to afford to come back, a lot of them want to buy one of the derelict vacant houses we have, because there's a decent amount. That's another big problem for our housing stock, and they can't really afford to fix it up. So one thing that's been kind of proposed is that families who want to do that we might allow them to have a short-term rental so they can help kind of recoup some of those financial costs. Other methods that we're using right now to try and increase our housing stock, so Saranac Lake has an interesting kind of like situation where we are part of 3 townships and 2 counties. It's kind of just divided in all different ways. But right now, Franklin County, which is the county that most of the town is in, has a land bank, and Essex County, which is the other county the town is in, is trying to get the state to allow them to have a land bank. And once they have a land bank, the housing task force has already talked with Franklin County, and will probably do this with Essex County, is working on kind of taking in some of those foreclosed homes, kind of as a town, revitalizing them and renting them out that way, kind of like as a housing co-op kind of scenario, to just kind of give another extra push for more people to be revitalizing those derelict houses. There's a few houses that have already been kind of picked for it right now that it's the very beginning stages, but this is the current plan for revitalizing a lot of those homes. There's also a few larger apartment projects, or just like larger like planned development communities being proposed here. But I guess by proposed, I mean designed and planned and approved, and they're happening. So there's a Saranac Lofts, which is going to be a 70 apartment complex. A lot of it's for lower income, affordable, and artists' residencies. And it's going to be mixed use. It's going to have commercial on site as well. It is revitalizing an old brownfield. Out of 70 apartments, it was approved with only 18 parking spots, which we thought was really great, because Saranac Lake doesn't have any minimum parking minimums, and it's right downtown, right next to the fire station, so it's very walkable. We expect a lot of people to be able to do what they need without needing a vehicle. There's also the old sanitarium on a hill. It was like a research lab, and sanitarium is being turned into a kind of developed community with a lot of kind of things. So there's going to be 27 apartments in an old abandoned building. There's going to be townhomes. There's going to be some single family homes. They're revitalizing one of the old chapels, and one of the local breweries is moving its tap room there. So it's kind of going to be like its own little other community about a mile from the center of downtown. So it's still very easy to get to. It's still within the village. So I guess some of the like upcoming projects we have. These are ways we're trying to just increase our housing stock. That's the biggest problem, is lack of housing stock.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, super thorough explanation. Appreciate that. Mike, I know you have some questions.
Yeah, so the first one is going to be specific to each of your towns. So these will be different for each of you. The first is for Brattleboro. And previously you'd mentioned that 24% of your population is 65% or older. So what is Brattleboro doing to attract young talent to stay or move to Brattleboro in order to stay in the town and stay strong and resilient in the future?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple initiatives going on. I think one of the largest ones was started, probably around 2020, but in 2021. So our development agency, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. They were doing work on a Southern Vermont economy strategy, or Southeastern Vermont, sorry, economic development strategy, and had identified the fact that businesses were having a hard time finding people to step in and replace retirees. And so they were looking at strategies of how to get younger, I guess. And so they were focusing on in-migration and immigration. And they started working to help attract refugees to the community, and started working with the Ethiopian Council Development. Oh gosh, I'm not going to get it right. ECDC. I apologize. They were able to attract ECDC to open. They're a refugee resettlement organization in the United States, and they were able to get an office in Brattleboro and begin. Actually, they opened in, I think, October of 2021, and by January of 2022, we were starting to resettle refugees in our community. And I think Brattleboro had about 100 Afghan refugees, New Vermonters, come to our community, and then there were a couple of refugees from some other countries as well. And so many of them have stayed. And that it's a really great example of kind of the partnerships that happen in Brattleboro. So it was a new process where they worked with the World Learning School for International Training here in Brattleboro. That's a higher educational institution that focuses on international education, cultural experiences, and sustainable development. And so when the refugees came to Brattleboro, they stayed at the SIT campus for up to 3 months, where they received language instruction and just kind of daily, how to assimilate into the United States, and the basics of banking and that kind of thing. And so that was a really great partnership that I think helped, hopefully, people establish in the community on a solid footing. And then at the end of 3 months, they were able to find housing, and it was really supported by a lot of different, it was called a co-sponsorship model. So a lot of people in the community helped out with the resettlement of the refugees. I think there were like 17 different organizations that were involved in that. So I would say the refugee resettlement is one of the ways that we're trying to attract younger people to the community. I think BDCC also has the Southern Vermont Young Professional Group, which is kind of provides socializing and networking and professional development for people under the age of 45. They do a lot of work in the high schools about creating, pipelines to different professions in the community as well. That's the BDCC does that. There's been some initiatives in the town, the Community Marketing Initiative, which is kind of a co-project between the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance and the Brattleboro Chamber of Commerce. They're using a portion of the town's tax funding from the room and meals tax, and they're doing a lot of marketing to different markets in the area, like Boston and New York, to kind of share the good stories about Brattleboro and build some excitement about our community. And so that's been really popular. And they're not just targeting, they're being specific in who they're targeting. So there's been some marketing with the LGBTQ community, people of color. So we're trying to be more diverse, be welcoming, and attract people to the community. And then finally, I think working on the housing, that is a critical piece of what we're doing. It can be hard for young families and young people to stay here, small household sizes. So we feel like anything that we can do to promote the housing and increase our housing stock is going to help people younger stay in the community. And then finally, just creating high quality public spaces, making sure our programming is great. We have a gallery walk on the first Friday of the month. It doesn't run through the winter, but it runs almost a year round. The town shuts down one of the streets and one of the big parking lots, and There's lots of arts programming and music and food trucks, and it's a real win-win for the community. The restaurants are full anyway, so it just brings a different atmosphere to the streets and makes people be out there and just really love our community.
Awesome. Thank you. And my apologies about saying R in the beginning. I have rhoticism, so my mouth just really struggles with that. So the second question is for you, Charlie. So for Saranac Lake, given your location in Adirondack Park and what you mentioned before about tourism, how does your community balance meeting the needs of current residents while also attracting and catering to visitors?
That's kind of the constant struggle here. The previous mayor, who was mayor for 13 years, did a lot of work trying to build up the tourism industry, make sure it was sustainable and robust. So we had some like larger new hotels pop up. Actually, a historic hotel that was built in, I believe it was the 1800s, might have been early 1900s. Was just revitalized a few years ago, right downtown, like it's kind of like the centerpiece of downtown almost now, which has been a big place for tourists to come. I think it's kind of an abstract problem because it's kind of just like I think the community is trying to feel like, oh, we feel like the community is engaging too much with like is too much tourism, maybe let's push back a little bit and find ways to keep it balanced at all times. So it's but I think there are a lot of things here that are kind of designed for locals, and if tourists want to come, they can. It seems to be a large mindset. Like the Saranac Lake Winter Carnival started over 100 years ago for locals, and it is still organized and designed. It is a year-round project to get the Winter Carnival happening. There, community members build a like full-size ice castle downtown, and it's just like a full week of festivities. And there's a parade, and there's a frying pan toss, and these are all things that are for locals, and the locals participate. And oh, great! People come here because they want to see this because it's a lot of fun, because this community is a lot of fun, and that's cool. But we're really focused on the initiatives are for locals. Like we're not doing anything like, oh, this will increase tourism. Just being a great community makes people want to come here. And I think that's kind of where we settled on. So we have a lot of great festivals and a lot of great events here. We are a place that people want to come anyway because it's a beautiful place, a center for hiking and kayaking, and downhill skiing and cross-country skiing and biking and what have you. So I think the first step in making sure that, well, not the first step, but one of the most recent step that we've taken was our short-term rental regulations, just to make sure that as we are growing as a tourism community, it kind of doesn't suffocate the locals. But I think the main thing is kind of just seeing how locals feel about tourism, and if there's enough pushback and there's a problem, we address it. And I think the most recent problem that we decided to address was the short-term rentals.
Cool, thank you. I have one more before we go back to Rachel. And you've both touched on seasons, and I had such fond memories growing up in the town I did of this time of year. We're starting to see spring, summer is on the horizon. Imagine you are a like 12-year-old kid. You've just gotten out for school. What is your summer day look like in your town? And let's start with Sue.
So we have an amazing recreational resource, the Living Memorial Park. It's got it for the warmer months. It has a great pool that's affordable and accessible for everybody. So I think the pool would definitely be a stop on it. Further up the hill in the park, there is a skate park with bowls, and it's really top notch. So I think any youth would have fun either, with their skateboard or rollerblades or whatever it is. So Living Memorial Park would definitely be a stop. We are on both the West River and the Connecticut River, and the Whetstone Brook. The Whetstone Brook and the West River have a couple of swimming holes, so youth might want to go check that out, or maybe do some fishing. And those two particular water bodies are definitely much more accessible. We have a good sidewalk network, so they're going to be able to get around. And then finally, Creamy in Vermont. Creamies are a big thing, soft serve ice cream. So that might be really great. They might want to go spend the day at the retreat farm, because you can definitely get Creamies there in the summertime. There's some walking trails and animals that you can visit as well. So I think that's what I would
just
do.
learned a new term. I never heard creamy for soft serve. Okay, awesome.
That's
Sorry,
fun.
Mike, go on.
I'm gonna start using that like out of context to just confuse people in the Midwest.
Maple creamy. It has to be a maple creamy if it's
Ooh, that sounds
Ooh.
really good.
Oh, that sounds great. Charlie, go ahead and describe a middle school, just got out of school. What do you do with your day?
I think what's one of the great things about Saranac Lake is that there are so many things you could do depending on your interests as a young kid. There's a skate park downtown. There is a youth center. There's a civic center. There are organizations that do after school classes for kids who maybe have parents who are still working later into the day. So there's, as I mentioned earlier, Art Rise, which does art classes for low cost. There's the Dance Sanctuary, which does the same thing with dance. And one of the biggest reasons I moved here is just that there is basically every single type of outdoor recreation within walking distance of downtown. You can go hiking from the coffee shop if you want to and be on the top of a mountain in an hour and a half. You can go swimming in the beach. You can go kayaking. You can go canoeing. You can go mountain biking. You can do anything. There's so many like Olympians have grown up here because there's just so much outdoor recreation. And I also noticed that a lot of kids are able to go around town alone. Parents feel it's safe. Parents trust their neighbors enough for that to happen. I see people walking to school by themselves all the time. So it's really great. And it's not even in the summer as well. In the winter, there are community volunteer led cross-country ski teams where just after school, kids can go to the town run cross-country ski mountain and just do some skiing. And if they feel like they don't even want to compete that day, they'll just build some jumps and go do snow jumps, and it's great. It's really fun. I think it's one of the reasons that people keep coming back after they grow up.
Thank you both.
Okay.
I'm very excited for summer even more now. So I'll hand it back to Rachel.
Yeah, I love it. All right. I want to hear about the areas that you both hope that your towns might improve or grow or change in the months and even years ahead. Like, what are some of your hopes for your community? And Charlie, let's start with you. What do you hope for Saranac Lake in the coming months and years?
So I think the biggest problems in Saranac Lake that I would like to see us further improve on, one we've already talked about is the housing shortage, which we have some really great projects in the works and really great plans to continue addressing those issues in even more robust ways than we are currently doing. And I'm really excited to see those new apartment complexes go up. I'm really excited to see the land bank start to revitalize old homes that have been sitting vacant for a while that, local people have not been able to get their hands on yet. So I'm really excited to see that, because there's a lot of, you own a house or you rent an apartment, and a lot of them are cheaper apartments and they're very hard to find. So I'm excited to see us continue to improve in that way. And another one is we adopted our Complete Streets policy and Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan in 2012. And although we've done a lot of projects in that since 2012, especially our sidewalks, we've added, I don't know the number, but we've added a lot of new sidewalks in the last 10 years. And we have, I think, $1 million in the budget or $100,000 in the budget to do more sidewalk additions this coming year. There are still some roads that definitely need some improvement. There's a intersection downtown that is just a lot of pavement, and this summer they are taking out a lot of that pavement, adding a stop sign and turning into a pedestrian plaza, and a lot of that space to slow down vehicles. But there's a few other intersections where Saranac Lake can definitely do that with maybe some new bike lanes would be nice. And if we can get the DOT maybe to agree with some of our plans, then there's a large road on the waterfront that we have some ideas for that we would love to get some shared use paths on and such like that.
Okay. And Sue, what are some of your hopes for Brattleboro in the coming months and years?
Yeah. Like Charlie mentioned, we have a pretty strong focus right now on making our streets safer for all users. We are just completing a walk bike action plan that's got lots of good projects in it, some of which we're already working on. So we are adding a bike lane this summer to a section of town road. The state of Vermont is actually, we have a lot of state-owned roads in our town, especially they're kind of our gateway ways into town, but they have also been really committed to doing bike lanes. And in fact, we'll have at least two routes done this summer. So I think we're going to see great improvement in our bike facilities. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. But we also have intersections that need to be narrowed and made safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. So we've got some design plans going for a couple of the intersections. So I think, looking forward to continuing that work. We have a pretty open process with a traffic safety committee where people can write their safety concerns, and it's taken to a board of people, discussed publicly. The town is making greater financial contributions to the bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So I'm really excited to see where that is. And we're definitely looking at some of the federal funding to hopefully make some of the bigger, more impactful changes. But in the meantime, we're willing to do demonstration projects and to make it safer and be able to evaluate how that's going. I think I'm also, the EV charging, we're definitely doing a lot of work around that, trying to establish a network. We require it in our land use regulations for a commercial site plan. If they have more than 20 parking spaces, they need to provide some of them for EV charging. So building out that network, I think, will be good. There is a lot of electric vehicles in Vermont. And I think improving our transit, we do have a bus. The town makes a contribution to a regional bus system. Right now they're studying microtransit for second shift workers in Brattleboro. So it'll be nice to see something come to fruition. We have a lot of people in town who don't have cars, which is great, but we need to make sure that they can get around. So whether it's biking, walking, or the bus, we want to continue to build that out. And then I mentioned parking. I know that our Planning Commission has an interest in parking reform for a long time now, probably at least 20, 30 years. We don't allow new private parking to be created in the downtown. It's only the municipal lots or maybe what was pre-existing, and that works really well for downtown. And so we want to, a couple of years ago, we did reduce our parking minimums for residential, it's 1 space per unit. And there are some options to waive that, especially if it's close to public parking or if it's near on the bus line or various other ways. But I think that there is an interest in parking reform and looking at different ways to do that so that we're not adding costs to development when it's not needed. And then of course the housing as well, but I kind of have spoken about that. Really just hoping to see that missing middle, and we even need larger multi-unit projects to meet our housing needs in the community.
I love that you both are really passionate about your communities and also have hopes for what they can do a little better.
And if you don't mind if I also add something that I want to, just this last year, we got so there used to be a rail corridor through town. Regular passenger service stopped in, I think, 1965. And there was some tourism use of it until relatively recently, but recently we worked with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation to get the rails ripped out and turn it into a multi-use path. And unlike most multi-use paths in the US that I'm aware of, a lot of it is recreational because it leaves town and goes to other towns as well. But within our town, it is kind of like a spine down town, and we were able to get the DEC to actually get it like completely paved within village boundaries. So it is now like a pretty large multimodal way to get around within town as well. We've been working on adding connectors. So that's another way we've been trying to improve on that bike and pedestrian infrastructure.
Very good. Okay. Mike, do you want to pull some questions that have come from the Q&A? We've got our last
Yeah. And I would
15 minutes or
encourage
so.
anyone who's here, if you have any questions that you've been thinking of and haven't put in there, to do so. Because a couple of these have actually been answered in the past like 3 minutes from both of your responses, which is awesome. The one question that came up that we had actually talked about a tiny bit before we started the webcast was, what was the impact of COVID and remote work on your towns? So I forget who we started with last time, Rachel.
Let's start with Sue. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So the impact of COVID and remote work. Yeah, we were definitely seeing a little influx in the population of people moving into Brattleboro because they could work remotely. A lot of our town has a decent broadband, but not all of it does. So one of the things that has spurred in the region is the Deerfield. Sorry, it's basically a fiber, kind of expansion that that is going to that kind of was spurred by COVID and some of the relief funding that came through in order to really make that easier for people to do. Like I said, we definitely did have some people who moved to the community and resettled here, and we had, I think, for the most part, people were able to function if they were living in neighborhoods and had good broadband or fiber. One of the things that I would like to talk about, though, that came out of COVID, just another example of our resiliency, was we do have a large artist population. And so, there were some programs around that were started by our downtown group to kind of help support and feed the artists at that time. And it was pretty successful. We were able to provide meals to artists, and for kind of just this short period. And then it kind of, brainstorming with some other organizations in the state, ended up into this really wonderful program called Everyone Eats, where people who were impacted by COVID could get meals several days a week. And the way it worked, it was funding from, it was FEMA funding that was used, and also some state funding. And basically the local restaurants were making the meals. They were provided a certain amount of money, they would make the meals. And then they also had to purchase a certain percentage of their product from farms. So you're supporting the restaurants that were out of, effectively shut down or, limited in their operations. They were supporting the farms who were providing food prior to that, and maybe they had excess. And feeding people at the same time when there was a lot of food insecurity. So that was a great help for COVID.
And Charlie, I know that you weren't living in your town in 2020, but if how COVID has impacted Saranac Lake, tell us.
I definitely know, like you said, I didn't live here yet, but I know a little bit about things that we did during COVID to kind of keep our community going. one of the things, we have a local grocery store, a locally owned grocery store, that was able to keep all of its employees during the entirety of COVID, and they were making in a similar way. I don't believe we had a large like everyone eats kind of program, but the local grocery store was kind of making food and doing a similar thing. I believe it was giving away to citizens. I'm pretty sure. There also, we had a decent influx of people who were like, oh, we can work from home, we're going to move, out of the city, do whatever. And I think out of that spurred the idea for the Carry, which is a co-working lodge in downtown Saranac Lake, which is actually getting moved to one of the new housing developments. It's going to be downstairs in a commercial space there, where it's basically, if you work from home, it's a space you can go to that's an office space where you can kind of collaborate with other people and kind of be social and connect with your community. Because a lot of times when you're working from home, you're alone in your home. So we wanted to kind of bring those people out and have them interact with the community and connect more. So we have the co-working lodge where people can go and work and collaborate. And we've definitely seen a lot of those people who moved up here being part of the community now, being more involved. And that's probably the most that I can say since I wasn't here.
Yeah, got it. Mike, do you want to pull another question or two?
Yeah, so we have about 9 minutes left, and a few of these are specific. Give me 1 second to decide which ones to ask. Okay, I like this
probably
one
won't be able to
about.
get to all of them.
I know. I think I'm gonna go with one about smaller housing developers. So this question says, how do you attract small housing developers? Our community has a lot of large developers that are doing more like large city designs that don't necessarily fit the community. So what does that look like in your city for attracting or encouraging smaller housing developers?
And either of you go for that one, I would say. Yeah.
I guess I'll jump in and say, I mean, so we don't have the large developers. Mostly what we're dealing with are smaller developers. I mean, there are definitely some sophisticated developers, to make the projects work, who can use tax credits of all different sorts, whether it's the low-income housing tax credits, whether it's new market tax credits. So when I say small, it doesn't mean they're not sophisticated. I think it's relationship building. So in our office, we are constantly reaching out to people in the trades and having those conversations and suggesting potential parcels that might be for sale and the scale of development that we're looking at. So that's one way we've done it. I mean, I think the Incremental Development Alliance, which has a relationship with Strong Towns, I think that's an organization that you should look into. They have done, they'll visit communities and do workshops and try to, teach individuals how to be a developer, how to put together, pro forma and all of those things. We haven't done that in Brattleboro, but one of our neighboring communities did that. So that might be one way to begin fostering small housing developers.
So for us, we kind of have the same thing where we do deal mostly with small developers, and I guess I wasn't sure exactly how that came to be, because I was thinking, I was like, the Trudeau Village project that I mentioned earlier, it's going to have a bunch of different types of housing, and the new brewery tap house, like that is a local developer. The large historic hotel downtown that was revitalized a few years ago was a local developer. We just tend not to have larger developers here, and I'm not exactly sure why. I know in our short-term rental law that we just passed or are working on passing, there is just a outright ban on exterior investors and developers coming in to start opening up short-term rentals who don't live in the community. So that's definitely one way that we're trying to encourage our locals to start doing that work. If for going forward, you can only open up a short-term rental if you live in the community. And while I'm not exactly certain about a lot of the other laws that might do similar things, like that is kind of just the precedent we are setting here. And like I said, for that, I'm aware of all the projects that we're doing are all local developers.
I want to throw in one final question in our last couple of minutes, just really briefly, because I thought this was such a good one from Susan, who asked, any suggestions on how to encourage conversations between long-term residents who maybe don't want change with newer community members who have a different vision, a wider vision for what we might grow up to be? How do you like bridge those barriers? It seems like both of you are probably involved in that sort of work and those sort of conversations. Charlie, do you want to start? You are a newer member of your community. Have you
Right,
found
yeah.
conversations doable?
Well,
with
I
those
think,
people?
yeah, I think what happened, I guess I'll use my experience kind of to project a little bit, but what happened with me is that I moved here and it was kind of the first time I lived somewhere that I thought was really worth caring about. Like, I lived in different suburbs around the entire state for my life so far. And I came here, I was like, wow, this is a really great place. I want to get involved. And I think that is a common thing here. I mean, there are so many volunteer-led organizations. But I mean, as for like fostering that conversation, I think you just need to foster the community, because I think once your community when you have a community that people love, everyone wants to get involved, right? So I guess start small and like Storytown says with everything else, incremental growth. And I think that's the way I think. I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think, Sue? Any
Yeah.
suggestions for fostering those type of conversations?
I think, having forums or, having people show up at the board and committee meetings, like I staff the planning commission, and, we're always receptive to people coming and talking, or if we have an issue that we want to talk about, we might invite them. Walking tours, like the walking tours we did last summer for our housing study to kind of talk about the issues of density and what is the housing that we want, was great, because we had new residents and we had people who'd lived in the community for a really long time. And so having space where they could mix and see the same things and talk about it was really great. And we've done that for, walking audits, and just trying to find the things that people will rally around together, and just, listening and being respectful. I also think, the community spaces, our library is such a great asset, and there's lots of opportunities for people to gather and have conversations in that space. So taking advantage of those community spaces.
Yeah, I was going to add, I think like having strong third places and like community events where people are getting together often, I think is really important, because conversations are fostered when people are together, right? So we have that grocery store I was telling you about that also has a cafe. And last time I was in there, I saw like 4 people I know. There was a local journalist, there was a local person with the Adirondack Center for Writing and Art Rise, and they were all there and they were talking, right? And then there's a coffee shop with and there's the winter carnival, and there's Mudfest, and there's like a bunch of different events where the community gets together. When the community gets together, the community talks, the community engages. So I guess maybe finding ways to engage those residents who aren't as often participating, like find out what they want to be doing here, right? How do you get them involved, even if it's just going somewhere for fun? Because when they're going somewhere for fun, they're engaging, right? So
Yeah, love it. Well, thank you both so much. I'm gonna put a link in the chat right now for anyone that's watching. You can head there and vote for which town you think is the strongest. Really, really appreciate both of you, all the work that you put in and the other community members that contributed to your application. Two amazing towns we're hearing from here. Just thank you so much for participating and sharing your communities with us so we can learn from you. For those who are watching this as a recording, you can vote at strongtowns.org/strongesttown for the winner of our 2023 contest. Voting is going to close this Thursday at 12 p.m. Central. Thank you again. Thanks, Mike, for your help, and good luck to Brattleboro and Saranac Lake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care, everybody.